My sister laughed into the microphone, her voice slicing through the hall. Nora, the single mother no one wanted, a used product with a defective child. My mother clapped along, her laughter sharper than the champagne glasses. Every guest turned, eyes burning into me, some amused, some pitying, none kind. I stood frozen, shame crushing my lungs, my son's absence heavier than the jeweled chandeliers above. I wanted to disappear, but then I noticed Ethan, the groom, rise slowly from his chair. He adjusted the microphone, his gaze locked on me, and in that instant the room forgot to breathe. The echo of my sister's laughter still clung to me long after the microphone was passed around. But the truth is, her words were not born that night. They were decades in the making. My life had been carved by sacrifices, each one made in silence, each one handed over like unpaid debt. At 18, I held a scholarship letter in my trembling hands, the kind of letter that could have lifted me out of our crumbling house. But Lily wanted to study abroad, and my mother's eyes fell on me like a silent command. So I folded that letter, tucked it into a drawer, and went to work at a local accounting firm instead. My paycheck became the river that carried Lily's tuition across oceans. Every invoice, every receipt, every rent payment had my name on it, but Lily's face glowed in photographs posted from Paris cafes and Italian piazzas. 10 years blurred into ledgers of loss. At 25, while others my age built careers, I built survival. My pay stubs funded Lily's wardrobe, her trips, her endless wants. Caroline, my mother, though I rarely called her that, praised Lily as the family jewel, the daughter who made us proud. My role was unspoken, invisible. I was the scaffolding holding up the monument everyone admired, but no one saw. When I became a mother, everything changed, yet nothing did. My son, Jacob, was born from a love that didn't last. His father left, unwilling to carry the weight I had always known too well. I raised Jacob in a small apartment above a laundromat, our nights lit by a single lamp as I worked through spreadsheets while he played with blocks. One night, as I guided his tiny hands to fit a red square into the right slot, he laughed in triumph, his eyes bright with joy. In that fragile moment, I felt whole, not because life was fair, but because I had carved a corner of happiness no one could touch. It was my pause, my breath, the rhythm that kept me from turning cold like the world around me. But reality always clawed back. Years before the wedding, I started a savings account. I called it Family Future Fund. I told myself it would be for emergencies, for stability, maybe for Jacob's education. Caroline insisted on handling the paperwork. For safety, she said. And I, exhausted, let her. I didn't realize then how surrendering control would plant the seeds of betrayal. 3 months before Lily's wedding, I reviewed a statement. One transaction stood out. A withdrawal, significant enough to rattle me, signed not by me, but authorized under my account number. I stared at the line of numbers, the way the digits mocked me. Who had signed? My name was forged, my trust siphoned. The money I had bled for, gone. And the trail, like a cruel joke, led right back into my family's hands. Lily, of course, never saw the sacrifices as hers to acknowledge. She wore her entitlement like a crown, strutting into our mother's kitchen one evening, her diamond ring catching the light. "Nora, please don't bring Jacob to the wedding," she said, voice coated in honey and disdain. "It's formal, and we want it elegant. You understand, don't you?" Understand. That word, wielded like a blade, meant I had to cut myself down again to keep her image pristine. My son, my joy, was out of place in her fairy tale. I bit my tongue until it bled, because every protest would be twisted into selfishness, into me being difficult. The mirror Caroline held up to Lily reflected only perfection. Lily was the daughter who shone, the bride who would marry into the Ward family, whose wealth and prestige would elevate us all, at least in Caroline's imagination. My mother poured the fund into Lily's designer gowns, into floral arrangements that cost more than a year's rent. She spoke of Lily as if she were marrying royalty, and in her eyes, I was the servant girl destined to clap from the shadows. But greed leaves fingerprints. I sifted through another bank statement one evening, my fingers trembling. This time, the transfer wasn't subtle. The money from the family future fund had been funneled to a company named Ward Event Holding. The name glared at me from the page, bold and unapologetic. Why would the money, my money, be cycling through the Ward family's event accounts? The walls of my apartment felt smaller, pressing against me as the weight of the discovery settled in. The betrayal was no longer just emotional. It was financial, tangible, written in ink I hadn't signed. My sacrifices, my years of silence, my hopes for Jacob, all funneled into Lily's glittering stage. I stared at the ceiling, hearing the echo of her laughter again, remembering the look in her eyes as she mocked me in front of everyone. She thought I was powerless, that I would never dare to expose her or Caroline. But as I sat there with the bank statement in my lap, I felt something shift inside me. Not rage, not revenge. Something colder, sharper, a resolve, quiet and unshakable. They believed my silence was weakness. They were wrong. And yet, one question pulsed louder than all the rest, hammering in my chest with every heartbeat. If the money had gone to the Ward accounts, did Ethan, the groom, already know? The invitation arrived in an ivory envelope embossed with gold, as if wealth itself had sealed it shut. My hands trembled when I pulled out the card, though not from awe. The moment my eyes skimmed over the words, my breath caught. They had spelled my name wrong. Nola Bennett, not Nora. A careless mistake, or perhaps intentional, a subtle signal that I was little more than a footnote in their shining event. My son's name wasn't there at all. The space where his name should have been was blank, erased from existence, as if he had never been born. When I confronted Caroline, her response was cold, rehearsed, almost bored. "Don't make this difficult, Nora. This is Lily's big day. Children. Well, they don't belong in a formal event like this. Don't make Lily lose face. She deserves elegance, not distractions." Her tone implied Jacob was nothing but a nuisance, a stain on the polished glass image Lily had so carefully crafted. I swallowed the words pressing against my tongue, words that would have burned, but I had learned long ago that fire was wasted on stone hearts. Instead, I nodded, the silent daughter, the reliable sister, the one who always knew when to step aside. But inside, something cracked deeper than before, the fracture widening with every heartbeat. A few days later, I stood outside a small suit shop, watching fathers guide their sons inside, preparing for roles as ring bearers or little groomsmen. I couldn't give Jacob that, but I pulled out my phone anyway and called him on video. His face lit up the moment he saw me, his missing tooth making his grin uneven but perfect. "Mama, look," he said, holding up a toy car. I smiled, tears burning my throat. In that moment, his joy was my armor, his innocence the only shield I had against the storm of humiliation closing in around me. That night, as I folded the invitation back into its envelope, a notification buzzed on my phone. An unknown number. I hesitated before opening it. One sentence blinked on the screen. "Check the venue's beneficiary list tonight." I froze, staring at the message. Who would send such a thing? Was it a cruel prank, or was someone else watching the same betrayal unfold? The day of the wedding arrived heavy with the scent of roses and champagne. The venue shimmered with chandeliers and crystal glasses, a palace built on the bones of my sacrifices. When I entered, ushers guided me not to the elegant tables near the stage, but to a chair tucked beside the restroom doors. Every laugh, every toast, every sparkle of jewelry seemed aimed at me, pressing me further into the shadows. I was not family here. I was the help who had mistakenly taken a seat among the guests. The humiliation came in waves, each more cutting than the last. During dinner, guests glanced at me and whispered, their eyes sliding over me with pity, thinly veiled as amusement. I clenched my hands under the table, forcing myself to breathe, reminding myself of Jacob's grin in that tiny suit shop video. Then came the toast. Lily stood at the head of the room, glass raised, her gown glittering like ice. Her lips curved into a smile that held no warmth. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, to celebrate love, family, and the future." but also, her gaze landed on me, sharp as a dagger. Let's take a moment to appreciate my sister Nora, the single mother nobody wanted, a used product, still somehow functional. Isn't it admirable? The hall erupted in laughter, a roar that vibrated against my chest. Caroline, seated proudly beside Lily, added her own venom. "And don't forget," she chimed in, voice loud enough for the speakers to carry, "she comes with a defective son. Quite the bargain, isn't it?" The sound of champagne glasses clinking became a cruel applause. My ears rang, my pulse thundered, but I couldn't move. I was trapped under the weight of their mockery, pinned like an insect beneath a glass dome. The very people who should have defended me had sharpened their tongues and gutted me before an audience. Yet, through the haze of shame, one detail pulled me back. Ethan Ward, the groom, didn't laugh. His eyes were fixed on me, but not with the contempt I expected. There was something else there, caution, recognition, maybe even guilt. He looked like a man holding a secret too heavy for his shoulders. As Lily lowered her glass and the laughter died into murmurs, Ethan rose slowly from his chair. The room shifted, uneasy. He reached for the microphone in Lily's hand, his movements deliberate. He straightened his tie, cleared his throat, and let his gaze sweep across the hall before locking on me. "Before we continue," he said, voice steady, the microphone amplifying every syllable, "there's a correction to be made." The room stilled, forks froze in mid-air, and for the first time that night, every laugh choked in the guests' throats as they waited, breathless, to hear what exactly the groom was about to correct. Ethan's words cracked through the silence like a gavel in a courtroom. Every face turned toward him, waiting for the kind of correction that could shift the ground beneath their feet. He didn't rush. He stood tall, the groom in his immaculate tuxedo, but there was no joy of celebration in his eyes. Instead, he spoke with the gravity of a man delivering a verdict. "I've reviewed the financial documents for this venue," Ethan said, his voice echoing off the chandeliers. "And there's something curious. The largest sponsor listed on the beneficiary report is not the Ward family. It's marked NB Trust." A ripple of confusion spread across the hall. Whispers floated like gnats, scratching against the air. NB. The initials hung heavy, obvious to anyone who cared to think. My breath caught in my chest, my pulse hammering so loudly I thought the microphone might pick it up from across the room. Ethan paused, his gaze cutting across the hall until it landed on me. "NB," he repeated, his voice low, deliberate. "Nora Bennett." The room erupted into gasps. Some guests turned toward me with disbelief, others with dawning recognition, as if seeing me for the first time that evening. My mother's wine glass clinked against her plate as her hand trembled. But it was Caroline's face that betrayed the most, color draining from her cheeks as though someone had ripped away her mask. "Did you notice it too?" The way her smile collapsed the moment the word forensic slipped into the air like a ghost from the past? Because Ethan wasn't finished. He held the microphone closer. "This isn't the first time Nora's path has crossed mine. Years ago, when I inherited my family's company, it was drowning in a quiet embezzlement. Millions gone, siphoned through shell accounts. Someone anonymous came forward with forensic accounting reports so precise they dismantled the scheme in weeks. That report saved our name. It saved me. The author was never revealed, but I know who it was now." The weight of his words landed like a gavel on my chest. I remembered those nights, Jacob asleep beside me hunched over a laptop, piecing together transactions that didn't add up, sending them under a cloak of anonymity because the Ward Company was too powerful to challenge openly. I never thought anyone would trace it back. And yet, here was Ethan, unveiling it in front of the very people who had mocked me hours ago. Around the room, voices collided. She? Impossible! That woman? I sat frozen, hands gripping the strap of my purse so tightly that the leather bit into my skin. I hadn't planned for this. I hadn't asked for this spotlight, and yet it was burning down on me like a stage light, illuminating every shadow my family had tried to cast over me. Ethan leaned forward, voice steady but edged with steel. And the funds used for tonight's extravagant event? They're not a gift from the Ward family. His gaze flicked to Lily, then Caroline. They were siphoned directly from NB Trust. The laughter that had filled the room earlier vanished. A suffocating silence spread instead. The Ward patriarch turned to his lawyer, who was already rifling through papers, lips pressed into a thin line. The guests, once gleeful participants in my humiliation, now fidgeted with napkins and avoided my eyes, shame flooding their cheeks. Caroline stood abruptly, her chair scraping across the marble floor. She lunged forward, hand outstretched for the microphone. "Stop this nonsense! Everything was for Lily, for her big day. Don't twist this into something ugly." Ethan sidestepped smoothly, lifting his phone. The projector behind him flickered to life, illuminating the wall with crisp documents, transfers, line items, account signatures. My breath caught when I saw the signature in bold, the scrawl of Caroline Bennett authorizing the withdrawal from the Family Future Fund. It wasn't me. It had never been me. The Ward family's lawyer whispered something urgent to Ethan's father, who stiffened visibly. Guests muttered, their whispers turning sharp, poisonous, not toward me anymore, but toward Caroline and Lily. I sat motionless, my heart pounding, but I did not rise. I did not clap. I did not shout, "I told you so." I simply clutched my purse tighter and took a slow, deliberate breath. This wasn't triumph, this was clarity. For the first time, I was not the victim at the edge of the room. I was simply present, steady, refusing to be erased. Caroline, desperate, snatched another microphone from the band setup. Her voice rang shrill, almost hysterical. "Everything I did was for my daughter. She deserves more than scraps, more than a life wasted like yours, Nora. This was for her future." The words rang out, hollow, brittle. And then, the projector screen flickered again. Not with Ethan's documents this time, but with something new, an email stamped with the header of a private bank. The subject line, "Unauthorized Transfer Review." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The timing was too perfect, the blow too sharp. I turned my head slightly, my pulse roaring in my ears. Who had sent it? Not me. Not Ethan. Someone else was in this room, pulling back another curtain. The hall fell into a stunned silence, every pair of eyes glued to the glowing words on the screen. The email glowing across the projector was like a blade slicing the air. Every guest craned forward, their chatter breaking into sharp fragments. The subject line was damning enough, but it was the attachment that made the room collectively hold its breath. Plan to reallocate family fund toward wedding expenses. Signed authorization enclosed. My name, my signature, stamped boldly across the bottom of the document. I felt the ground tilt beneath me, shame washing through me like acid. But Ethan spoke before I could find air. "This signature," he said, raising his hand to silence the whispers, "is not hers. It belongs to the same device Caroline Bennett has used to authorize multiple transfers in the last 6 months, and it was Lily who pushed the request through, knowing it would only pass under Nora's name." Caroline's face flushed scarlet. Lily's hand flew to her mouth, trembling. Around us, the guests no longer laughed. Their voices were hushed, their eyes sharp, feeding on scandal like vultures circling carrion. My throat burned, my lungs screaming with words I had never allowed myself to say. But when Ethan paused, turning to me as if to offer the stage, I lifted my chin and spoke only one sentence. Quiet but clear. "Please, stop dragging my son into your debts." The hall fell still again. For the first time, my voice carried, not drowned in ridicule, not brushed aside. Some guests shifted uncomfortably, eyes flicking toward Caroline and Lily as though finally seeing the cruelty for what it was. Then the Ward patriarch's voice cut through. He rose slowly, his stature commanding silence. "Who authorized the adjustment to the prenuptial clause?" he demanded, his gaze cold and unyielding. "There's no mention of it in our copy. When was it changed and for whom?" The words thundered in my ears. The prenup. I hadn't even known there was one, but suddenly it hung in the air like a guillotine. Caroline looked to Lily, who shrank under the weight of her mother's stare. Ethan's jaw tightened, his lawyer already shuffling papers, scanning signatures, scanning timestamps. The music had long since died. All that remained was the electric hum of panic, the murmurs of guests who had come for champagne but now thirsted for blood. Did you hear it? How the tone of the crowd shifted, once laughing at me, now whispering in disgust at them? The projector flickered again, this time displaying the prenup clause itself. One section glowed red. In the event of financial misrepresentation or fraudulent use of marital funds, the bride's family agrees to a compensatory payment equal to damages plus reputational restitution. The silence broke in an instant. Gasps, shouts. A few guests even laughed, but this time in disbelief, not mockery. Lily stumbled back, her hand clutching at her veil as though the lace could shield her from the storm. No, that wasn't supposed to," she whispered, but the microphone caught every syllable. Ethan's father slammed his palm against the table, rattling silverware. "You signed this?" he barked, his fury cutting through the room. The lawyer leaned in, whispering hurriedly, confirming that the clause had been added only months ago, right before the transfers began. And the authorization? It bore Caroline's device ID. Lily collapsed into her chair, sobbing. Her perfect wedding, the glittering fairy tale she had paraded, had become the noose tightening around her neck. The very contract meant to protect her future was now the blade carving it apart. I sat still, watching the collapse unfold, feeling a strange calm seep into my bones. For years I had been erased, my sacrifices buried. Tonight, without lifting a finger, the truth had clawed its way into the light. Caroline gripped the microphone with both hands, her voice desperate, shrill. "This is all for Lily, for her happiness. Can't you see? She deserves it. Every daughter deserves to be a princess on her wedding day." But her words cracked and fell flat, echoing in the silence of judgment. A man near the back muttered, loud enough for the crowd to hear, "Not with stolen money." Another scoffed, "What kind of mother humiliates her own child to fund another's lies?" The murmurs grew louder, rippling across the hall like wildfire. You could feel the air shifting, the tide turning. Where once the laughter had suffocated me, now it suffocated them. Caroline's eyes darted, desperate for an escape. She leaned down, hissing to Lily, "Call the banker. Fix this before it's too late." Her voice, though low, carried to the first few rows, and as if summoned by fate, the double doors at the back of the hall opened with a sharp click. The banker himself stepped inside, flanked by two officers in dark suits, economic crime investigators. Their badges gleamed under the chandeliers as the crowd erupted in gasps once more. Caroline froze, microphone slipping from her hand, clattering across the floor. The hall was no longer a wedding, it was a tribunal. The banker's arrival marked the death knell of the wedding. The officers moved swiftly, their voices low but firm as they gathered papers from Caroline's trembling hands. Within minutes, the whispers from the guests became a torrent. Phones buzzed, cameras discreetly snapped, and the grand ballroom felt less like a celebration and more like a courtroom caught mid-sentence. News spread quickly. Caroline's accounts were frozen before the champagne could even lose its fizz. The Family Future Fund, the money that had been siphoned for Lily's fairy tale, was under forensic review. Within hours, the sponsors who had loaned their names to Lily's beauty salon began sending messages of withdrawal. Contracts evaporated like mist, her business collapsing in real time as guests scrolled through updates on their phones. Ethan's father stood before the microphone, his expression carved from stone. "The Ward family does not condone theft, deception, or the exploitation of trust," he declared, his voice steady and cold. "As of this moment, all partnerships, contracts, and joint ventures with the Bennett family are terminated." His words landed with the finality of a gavel. The weight of his judgment crushed Lily more than any headline could. She collapsed in tears, her gown pooling around her like a broken promise. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks, her sobs carrying louder than the violins that had once played her entrance. I watched her crumble, the sister I had raised, the girl I had sacrificed everything for. My throat tightened with the taste of bitterness, but also pity. Slowly, I walked to her, ignoring the stares and whispers that followed me. I knelt and placed a glass of water in her shaking hands. She flinched at my touch, eyes wide, searching mine for cruelty. But there was none. I had no desire to stand above her like a conqueror. I only wanted the truth laid bare. Her lips trembled. You did this, didn't you? She sobbed. You planned all of it. Every revelation, every email. You wanted me destroyed. I shook my head, calm, steady. No, Lily, not me. Her sobs grew harsher, confusion twisting into fear. If not me, then who had pressed the knife that slid open her facade? The ballroom hummed with uneasy energy. Guests shifted, their voices low. They had laughed at me, ridiculed me hours ago. Now, some of them came forward, their eyes lowered in shame. One by one, they whispered apologies, awkward, stumbling words meant to wash away their guilt. We didn't know. We thought it was just a joke. Their contrition meant little, but still, I nodded. Let them keep their scraps of dignity. The real fracture was unfolding at the center of the room. Caroline, stripped of her composure, turned on her daughter with venom. This is your fault. If you hadn't demanded more, if you hadn't insisted on that wedding, none of this would have happened. Her voice was shrill, her finger stabbing the air like a blade. Lily's sobs turned into screams. You forced me to sign. You told me it was safe. You said nobody would ever know. She ripped off her veil, hurling it to the ground. The symbol of her innocence became nothing more than tattered lace underfoot. The guests recoiled at the sight, the spectacle turning grotesque. Families who had come to toast the union now muttered in disgust, shaking their heads. The sound was like cracks in a dam, small at first, then widening, splitting everything apart. Ethan stood quietly, then approached the microphone. His voice, when it came, was stripped of ceremony. I will not marry into theft. He placed the microphone down gently, as if lowering a coffin lid, and stepped away from Lily. His silence was more damning than any accusation. The room erupted. Some gasped, others whispered fiercely. Lily reached for him, clawing at the air, but Ethan did not turn back. He had already made his choice. I remained still, my hands folded in my lap, my heart heavy with both vindication and sorrow. This was not victory, it was the natural end of years of lies. As the chaos swirled, the venue manager approached me cautiously. In his hand was a sealed envelope. He leaned close, his voice barely above a whisper. For the rightful beneficiary of NB Trust, he said, pressing it into my palm. The paper was heavy, the seal unbroken. My fingers tightened around it as questions roared in my head. What was inside? Proof of ownership? More secrets? Or perhaps a key to something I had never imagined belonged to me? The hall fell into hushed murmurs once more as the envelope rested in my lap, its weight greater than gold. The envelope in my hands felt heavier than any weight I had carried before. My fingers trembled as I slid the seal open. Inside was a single document, yellowed with time but pristine, bearing my father's signature. My breath caught as I read the words aloud to myself. NB Trust, established for the benefit of Nora Bennett, to be placed under her authority upon her 30th birthday. My chest tightened, the truth unraveled with ruthless clarity. The trust had always been mine. Every cent funneled into Lily's wedding, every cruel insult hurled at me tonight. It had all been theft, plain and simple. And the venue itself, the grand hall echoing with gasps and whispers, was one of the properties funded by that trust. My father had left me more than memories. He had left me dignity, a foundation, a claim no one could erase. I folded the paper slowly, carefully, as if it were Jacob's hand I was holding. The noise of the hall faded behind me. The rage that once clawed at my ribs softened into resolve. This wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about boundaries, the lines I would no longer allow anyone to cross. The following week, I met Caroline at the lawyer's office. She looked diminished, her clothes less regal, her posture bent under the weight of exposure. "We can fix this," she whispered, clutching at the table like it was her last lifeline. But I shook my head. "There is no we," I said firmly. "I won't pour another cent into your schemes. The family fund is dissolved. From now on, my resources go to Jacob, and to a future built on honesty, not lies." She stared at me, silent, then lowered her eyes. For the first time, I saw not arrogance, but defeat. Days melted into weeks, and the chaos of the wedding scandal slowly shifted into gossip columns and courtroom dates. But for me, life returned to something quieter, simpler. On a windy Sunday, Jacob and I stood in an open field with a bright red kite. His laughter rose as the kite danced higher and higher into the blue sky. I steadied the spool in his little hands, guiding him, then let go. The string unwound, the kite soared, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight of my past drift away like a shadow chased by the sun. I was not bitter, I was not broken, I was whole, even if scarred, and I was determined that Jacob would grow up knowing love without conditions, safety without sacrifice. That night, my phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "If you ever want to audit my heart, the books are open." I read it twice, a smile tugging at my lips, but I didn't reply. Not yet. My journey wasn't about finding someone to fix me. It was about standing on my own, secure in who I had become. Still, his words lingered like a gentle promise. A door left ajar, not forced open. Meanwhile, justice wound its way through the system with quiet efficiency. Lily's salon shut its doors, creditors circling like wolves. Former friends stopped returning her calls, her once glittering social circle reduced to whispers and pitying stares. She faced hearings, fines, endless scrutiny. Her dream wedding turned into a lifetime of consequences. Caroline fared little better. Court orders forced her to repay what she could, though the amount would keep her tethered to debts for years. She tried to rebuild, but without her mask of superiority. She was just another woman standing in line at the bank, humbled and tired. The Ward family released a public statement, a curt declaration of their commitment to integrity. They distanced themselves from the scandal, though Ethan sought me out privately. One evening, he stopped by my office, apology etched deep in his expression. "I should have questioned things sooner," he admitted. "I let it go too far." I nodded, meeting his eyes. "You can't carry the guilt for their choices, but thank you for standing up when it mattered." He left with a small smile, one that hinted at something unspoken. But I was in no rush. My life was not a race anymore. The weeks grew into months. I kept working, raising Jacob, building a life free of shadows. I no longer needed the approval of those who had broken me, their silence, their absence. It was a relief, not a wound. One evening, as Jacob slept peacefully, I sat at my desk and unfolded the NB Trust document once more. My father's handwriting stared back at me, steady and sure, as though he had known all along what battles I would face. And in his foresight, he had given me not just money, but freedom, the freedom to walk away. Justice had not arrived with fanfare or vengeance. It had arrived like balance sheets settling, like ledgers evening out. Quiet, inevitable, undeniable. Sometimes justice isn't loud. It isn't the roar of revenge or the sting of public humiliation. Sometimes justice is silence, the kind that follows when lies collapse under their own weight, when the truth finally takes its rightful place. It was the quiet ledger that finally balanced, and I was free.